Welcome to the Navigating an Ancient Faith podcast. My name is David Gortney. Recently, my brother JR and I returned from a trip from Greece. About halfway through that trip, a theme started to emerge, a theme that we called the Ascent. Now, the Ascent refers to ascending to a sacred space, whether it be the Parthenon in Athens or monasteries in the Meteora region of Greece. So we paused in this Meteora region of Greece and tried to capture our thoughts on a video. That video was well received, so we decided to do a follow-up to really flesh out this idea of the Ascent. That'll be on the next podcast. But before we jump into that podcast, we wanted to give everyone a chance to hear that original audio from that video we recorded in Meteora. You can find that video on YouTube, by the way. So what follows is the audio of our initial thoughts of the Ascent. We'll discuss this further in the next podcast. Enjoy, and thanks for listening.
All right, so we're in the Meteora region of Greece, and Meteora is known for these monasteries that are built on these huge rock outcroppings, and you can probably see one in the distance. And we spent all yesterday going into about 3 of these, this morning hiking. And one of the themes of this trip that has emerged everywhere we've gone is the theme of the Ascent. We saw it first in Athens, where to go up to the Acropolis, you had to walk a sacred path. And this path was actually called the Peripatos or something like that. And peripateo in the New Testament just means to walk. And Paul uses it to describe the Christian life. The Christian walk, the Christian life is actually just a walk.
Well, I think the idea that we view it in the West as a walk, like a stroll. We've been hiking all morning, and sometimes the sun's on us, and sometimes it's up, and sometimes it's down. And we sort of do, I guess we take a hiking analogy and say, yeah, man, that's life. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But, it's like we said, we've said it over and over again, this idea of, no, it's an ascent, and it's intentional. And over, these temples are built this way. We saw it first at the Acropolis. We went to Delphi, which was a temple to Apollo. It's that same thing. And it's just funny that over and over we've said, here's this ascent again. This idea that it's very intentional to build it this way. These monasteries, how can you not stand in awe as you approach it? And, there's just no way to climb these steps and then just sort of get up there and screw around and talk a bunch of stupid nonsense. And you know what I mean? It's like you're in a frame of mind, even all these centuries later, and it's just kind of fascinating to see that play out over and over again.
Yeah, so in Athens, we saw the Peripatos, the sacred way. In Delphi, we saw the sacred way. And I mean, you could say those are pagan structures, but then you get here to Meteora, and we walked 150, 200 flights of stairs to get to the tops of these things. And it's the same thing. It's this idea that the ascent itself prepares you for entering the sacred space you're about to enter.
Right.
And it would be completely different. And, sometimes we see this in our culture today, that you rush off to church, you go through Starbucks, you run in the building, and then you expect to encounter the holy, but there has been no ascent in our modern life.
Yeah, no preparation. And it's funny, us going to church as kids. I remember Mom playing Christian music on the radio. And it's funny because even something that simple is trying to capture, oh, hey, let's prepare for this, And so that was going to be one of the questions I asked you. It's like, well, we're not building a monastery in the States up in the Rocky Mountains somewhere. There probably is one, but how does a small town church like where I'm from or where you're from, how did they capture the idea of ascent? Obviously, without building these structures that you have to climb to,
Well, some of it I would think is still found in before automobiles. The walk, you walked 10 to 15 minutes. And there again, it's that idea in the New Testament again of walking. Walking was part of getting and preparing yourself for where you're going next. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the questions I've been wrestling, thinking about, like, how do you bring back the ascent when our churches are convenient? We have automobiles to get there as fast as we can. It's not necessarily, maybe it is taking a walk, but maybe it's something else. Like you said, maybe it's listening to music. Maybe it's doing creating some kind of space, whatever it is that starts to, I like the figure of the ascent because you also rise above the mundane. And we saw this at the Acropolis.
Yeah.
Right? That the everyday world was down there and you had to make your way up to the holy. And so there was this process of leaving behind, noise and job,
the animals,
tasks, errands to run, what am I going to eat for lunch? There was a process of leaving all that behind.
Yeah. And rising up to it. We even talked about how you can, the piety, which we look at as a negative thing, sort of a pious priest. But we were standing up there commenting, it's like, man, how are you not pious? Looking down at the time, animals in the street and people buying and selling and running around doing their daily activities. And you're up on this Temple Mount that you can see for maybe 100 miles, but definitely dozens of miles. It's just amazing how far you can see and how that also can get into your psyche and sort of say, to take maybe a negative approach to it, how that gets in your psyche and say, I was created for this. I was created to be up here, and those are down there, and we're up here. And sort of that whole separation of priesthood and laity that in the West or in modern churches, we definitely try to get away from.
Yeah.
And that's another thing we talked about that I think kind of ties into the whole, what do modern churches do? And we had discussed one of the I won't say a mistake, but some people have called it a mistake is the seeker-friendly churches of, hey man, if you want jeans, if you want to wear a ball cap into church, come as you are. And there's a need for that. But we've also seen that went too far. And you made the comment, I thought that was great, about our stadium churches now are like stadiums, the priest or the pastor is down there on the stage. We're up above him. And there's actually a proximity mindset that gets in our minds that really is reflective of the church today of like, nobody would consciously say this, but we're higher than you. Our tithes pay your salary. And that consumerist mindset that we have in church, and how there are no other, the theaters are that way. But the temples are all, the priest is up high, the priest is elevated, and we're down here and we're looking to him. Our gaze is forced upward. And the ideal is sitting in front of us, and that's what we're supposed to strive and achieve for.
And even in the chapels that we've been in a Greek Orthodox monastery, the picture or the icons of Jesus and the disciple are even above the priest. And then if you look in the very top of the dome, you see this beautiful icon of Jesus, and it's all designed to make you lift your eyes up. Everything is up.
Yeah, force your gaze up.
And there's something about how do we capture that? How do we recapture that without redesigning buildings and everything like that? But how do we get the idea that we're ascending to a holy spot? We have to look upward. We have to leave all the mundane behind because we have to prepare ourselves for the holy. And then, of course, as we were talking, the flip side of that is, every ascent there's a descent, which is, okay, how am I changed going back?
Right. How do I take my ascent back to my mundane life and the people I come in contact with every day and things like that? And how do I bring that back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we've lost that. And you're right. I don't know what the answer is, but one of the things that absolutely clear is the more we go around and look at it, the more you see that is built in. It's the system, the built in the structure of the culture of ancient church life or ancient spirituality.
Yeah. Whether it's a pagan temple or a monastery, everything about the ancient world, they understood that they were preparing you to go to a holy place. And that was nothing that they took lightly.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the stories we heard at Delphi is that one of the emperors of Rome came to visit the Oracle at Delphi. And we were joking, I don't know if it was a story, we were joking that, there might have been a tendency to say, have the Oracle come down to see me. And that was absolutely not. That's not going to happen.
King or not. Yeah.
You have to make the ascent. You have to make the ascent to the Oracle, because what you were about to experience went beyond just your position as emperor and an empire. You were entering sacred space. And we see that. Yeah, we've seen it everywhere on this trip.
Yeah. And one last thing, because we probably should have said it earlier, but one thing that was real obvious at Delphi was the intentionality of every step. There were certain statues, there were certain plaques, references that you could tell were elevated as you elevated. So at the bottom, there would be things, there'd be plaques and references to kind of, let's say, earthly earthly battles of, hey, do you remember when when our team beat their team doing this? It was kind of, there were things to be looked up to, but they weren't divine. And then as you kind of went up the road, then you saw these icons that were elevated, that were more eternal. We saw how many times the pedestals that were 30, 40 feet?
Yeah.
Of marble or bronze, and the idea is to look up and to see, in this case, the Greek Sphinx, or the three ladies, or the tri-headed serpent, or, it's that same thing of looking up, and they were all had an eternal significance tied to them. But yeah, that road going up, that was very intentional. I noticed that it was, it just continued to elevate as you climbed. You're like, oh wow, we're past the wars, we're past all the sort of the petty wins that we've had in our society, and now we're approaching the divine, clearly,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
yeah, I know it's been neat, and you can't get it out of your head. And once you see it, it's like once we noticed it, it was in Athens. We've said it over and over. Oh,
You see
here we
it
go.
everywhere.
Here's the ascent.
You see it everywhere. We talk about it every time. Here's the ascent. We're preparing ourselves for something special, something sacred when we get to the top of this. So we're about halfway through our trip. Those are our thoughts. If we, maybe we'll do another one if we reach any conclusion.
I'm afraid we started with the best. How do you beat this? As we were setting up the camera, I'm like, this is going to be our first podcast. You're thinking, well, hey, the next one's going to be better than this. Yeah, no, it's not. The view is not going to be. Maybe the thoughts are. I don't know. But how do you beat this?
So that was the conversation that JR and I had while in Meteora, Greece, sharing our observations on the first part of our trip. By the way, if you've never been to Meteora, it's a beautiful location. As I mentioned, you can watch the video of that on our Navigating an Ancient Faith YouTube channel, along with other videos from that trip. We wanted to follow up with that conversation and expand a bit on that idea of the ascent. So be sure to listen to part 2, where we go a bit more in depth, having a little more time to process things since we've been back. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you enjoy the conversation so you don't miss future episodes. We have a lot more content on our website, navigatinganancientfaith.com. No spaces, all one word. There are articles, videos, profiles of biblical cities that we've traveled to, so check it out. And finally, thanks for listening.